So, I know you're all just dying to know what my favourite film is, and I couldn't possibly begin a category. It's Nosferatu. F.W. Murnau's 1922 silent classic. The birth of a stream of endless Dracula adaptations, the home of Max Schreck's timelessly haunting portrayal of the vampire, the beginning of horror as we know it, I love Nosferatu. In fact, all things Dracula adjacent, and when I heard it was being remade again, I was obviously outraged because I'm a snob. Then I was skeptical, then I was hopeful when I saw the trailers, then I saw it, and I was confused. My first words to my boyfriend when we left the screening were, I don't know how I feel about that. This might seem like a bad thing to any normal human, but if I don't initially hate something, your hopes should remain high for me beginning to like it. And do I like it? Yeah. But first, some exposition. Dark Loft, I hear no one ask, but answer nonetheless. Why do you like Nosferatu so much? There are two main reasons that I hold this film in such high regard. The first is its experimentation with film as a visual medium. Obviously, in 1922, film was entirely visual, there was no dialogue, so to make a feature endure as much as Nosferatu has, you have to be pretty impressive to look at. Nosferatu is a beautiful film. Unlike many of its German expressionist brethren, it was filmed almost entirely on location. The sweeping landscapes, though static, are wonderfully gothic. The arches of the crumbling castle draw the eye directly to the subject on screen. The haunted forest, created with film negative, strikes me as genius, and the work with shadows is so memorably haunting and cinematically beautiful that I'm torn between fear and awe. The effects too were revolutionary at the time, from the use of stop motion to make it appear that Orlok could will objects and rise from his grave, to the ludicrous use of fast motion in an attempt to make Orlok move unnaturally in a way that would unnerve the audience, but actually just makes him look slightly hilarious. They were playing with film. It was still so young, and I love to see how early filmmakers use their imaginations on screen to create brilliance. The first time I watched this film, my eyes were literally glued to the screen. If I was going to make a horror movie, I thought, this is exactly what it would look like. The second reason is Max Schreck. For film lovers, there is always a performance they can point to that sticks out in their minds as the best thing they've ever seen. It might be DiCaprio. It might be DiCaprio or Tom Hardy or Boris Karloff or any of the numerous talents that have graced the screen throughout cinema's history. Mine is undoubtedly Max Schreck's performance as Count Orlok. When you watch Nosferatu, you might watch Gustav von Wangenheim's performance as Hutter, Orlok's unfortunate estate agent, and think, dear me, the overacting is coming out of his ear holes. There is a reason that early film performances were so dramatic. These people were transitioning from the stage to the screen. When you act on a stage, you are reaching for the back of a sometimes massive theatre. Everyone from the front of the room to the back has to see your movements and feel what you want them to feel. On a screen, this occasionally looks ridiculous. The other reason acting was so hammy is because they were relegated to silence. Screen performances were a very unique kind of physical theatre. You had to convey your words without being able to say them. Max Schreck is, I think, entirely unique in his role in that if you put his performance in a modern film, it wouldn't strike you as oddly over the top or out of place. He is brutally amazing. Every second of his 9 minutes on screen is fantastic. The raise of a hand is enough to make you gasp at his unbelievable monstrousness. He's so slow and elegant whilst conveying a rodent-like ugliness. He is entirely inhuman. I find it difficult to reconcile that there is a man under all that makeup. His performance was so good, in fact, that there was a myth surrounding the film that Schreck actually was a vampire. A bit of history that was immortalised in the film Shadow of the Vampire, which also starred Willem Dafoe. The slow shot of Orlok approaching Hutter's bedroom door is probably my favourite moment in cinema. The makeup on Max Schreck is genius, and in my opinion unbeatable. Don't get me wrong, I like Klaus Kinski's Orlok makeup, but the crudeness of 1922's version is just... It's a sort of rule in horror that you shouldn't expose your monster's face fully. Keep that air of mystery around them, but the fully lit frontal view of Count Orlok is to me a thing of beauty, and Max Schreck was a genius for the way that he portrayed him with such subtlety. His silence speaks volumes. Is it fair for me to go into a remake of a film I feel so strongly about and expect it to live up to my expectations? No. And that's not what I did. If I wanted to watch F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu again, I would watch it, and the last thing I want in a remake is for it to be the exact same film with no artistic interpretation or merit of its own. That being said, if we take the original out of the equation completely, do I think that Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is a well-made film with artistic merit and a good script? Yes, I do. Do I think it added worthwhile content to the plot of Nosferatu? Yes, I do. Obviously, the original Nosferatu is a rip-off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel, not the film featuring Keanu Reeves' abominable British accent.
Doctor, you must understand. I doubted everything, even my mind. I was impotent with fear.
So we follow Thomas Hutter, our discount Jonathan Harker, as he journeys to Count Orlok's castle, so he can sign a deed to move to Germany. Meanwhile, back in Germany, something strange is going on with Ellen, our Mina Murray/Lucy amalgamation. She seems to have a psychic link to the Count. Orlok tortures Hutter for a while, catches a boat to Germany that is definitely not the Demeter, brings with him a horrific plague, does some weird scampering around, and then eventually goes to Ellen and succumbs to sunlight after sucking her blood all night long. It's a simplified version of Dracula that is attempting wholeheartedly to not be Dracula. What I like about Eggers' version is that it takes the skeleton of Nosferatu's plot and adds to it in ways that are totally needed. There are a lot of improvements made to the characters that aren't Count Orlok in this film. I actually care about their plight, and when Ellen makes her ultimate sacrifice at the end of the film, it feels far more impactful when we understand the link between her and Count Orlok. In the original, the lore is similar. Only a woman pure of heart can defeat the monster by inviting him into her bedroom until dawn breaks, but Eggers adds a modern twist to this by making her linked to Orlok from past experience. Ellen's character specifically is improved upon greatly. Far from being a helpless and forlorn wife, she is actually a woman stuck in a time that silences women as superstitious and unreasonable. The scene in which she indignantly asks Friedrich why he doesn't like her and he foolishly tries to put her in her place is great and makes you root for her in the same way we root for Mina in Stoker's Dracula. She's surrounded by men who are trying to protect her from an evil that only she truly understands. They're trying to rationalise something that she is actively experiencing. I liked so much that they made her the focal point of the film. As Graham argues in his review, with hubby Thomas occupying the traditional damsel in distress role and fellow vampire hunters Friedrich Harding and Van Helsing figure Professor Alban Eberhard von Franz proving ineffectual, it's Ellen who must wrestle control. At the same time though, there was something about Depp's performance that left me feeling rather cold. She is obviously committed to the role, contorting her body in horrific ways and balancing between Ellen's madness and melancholy extremely well, but there were parts, for example, the scene on the beach, where I didn't like her dramatic take on the performance. In the same vein as the original, it was a little bit over the top for me. While that might have totally been the intention of the filmmakers and her, it wasn't something that I enjoyed about the performance. Count Orlok in this film is undeniably a triumph. I really liked this interpretation of the character. His rattling breath is disgusting and really gives the impression that he's in pain. He's literally a walking corpse, all the way down to the makeup. My one criticism is the hair. I wish they'd kept him bald, but this is definitely bias speaking, as the prosthetics used for Orlok were breathtakingly horrific. I like the addition of the mustache though, which is actually book accurate. Bill Skarsgård has redeemed himself with this one after the absolute miss that was The Crow last year. The voice he gives Orlok is a brilliant mix between Bela Lugosi, Gary Oldman, and a demon, and he's mastered the art of the Orlok hand-raise. But he added so much to this more folklorish interpretation of the character. If you'd asked me before I saw it if I thought Skarsgård would live up to Max Schreck, I would have chuckled petulantly. And while no one can ever beat Max for me, I think he did a stand-up job. The cinematography was inarguably great. They keep some of the things that I love in the original, like the focus on arches and shadows, that really gives it that Nosferatu feeling, without ripping shots straight from the film and recreating them. Because of modern technology, these scenes are given a fluidity that just wasn't possible with the static wooden boxes of 1922. I like that the colours are so muted, and at night it looks black and white, like there's a transition between day and night that leaks this world of colour and makes it into a horror film in and of itself. The sweeping shot of Orlok's hands descending over the town was fantastically done. And there was this little shot of the Doctor and Friedrich in an alley that struck me as very Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with its use of shapes, which I really liked. I love the use of close-ups too, like Orlok's eyes opening or Thomas being incredulous when he's being laughed at by the village people. It keeps the gothic tone that Nosferatu is meant to have without looking like Twilight. In fact, Graham writes in his review that Nosferatu's key intention, it seems, is to rescue the vampire from its twinkly tween era and to return it to its folkloric roots. And at that, it totally succeeds. Orlok is self-admittedly devoid of love, he only consumes. It's also great to watch a scene that is set at night and actually be able to see what is happening. It's masterfully lit. When Orlok is introduced, he's almost entirely in shadow. For most of the film, in fact, his face is obscured, but I don't lament that, it is the rule after all. But the shadows and silhouettes don't make it difficult to make out what's happening, and give the effect to the viewer that Orlok is a figment, not quite real, making him more dreadful for a modern audience. The way the film is edited adds so much to it too. The transitions between shots make Nosferatu feel in parts like a fever dream. The characters are almost being called forth by predestiny. Thomas doesn't know how he gets to the entrance of the Count's castle, and neither do we. It's a waking nightmare. The same way that in a dream you will suddenly be somewhere else. This dream nightmare-like style of editing does a brilliant job at portraying Orlok's altering effects on the setting of Nosferatu. His tyranny is ever present in every element of the filmmaking. It is extremely clear from watching the film and from my rambling evaluation of it that a lot of talented people had their hands in making it. So, with all this praise I have for Eger's Nosferatu, why was I so torn when I left the cinema on that faded Thursday night? The answer is preconceived notions. My notion was, Nosferatu is the best film ever made, and therefore anything trying to replicate it will be pathetic in comparison. When I found this wasn't the case, my brain was left scrambling for nitpicks and flaws that would prove my original conclusion correct. The other answer is, of course, gatekeeping. I hate to say it, but I went into the screening and said to Sam, I wonder how many of these people have actually seen Nosferatu? And it's just that level of pretension that stopped me from recognising straight away that this is obviously a great film, made by someone whose love of Nosferatu eclipses mine by many, many years. My human monkey brain calls out to all the remakers and rebooters and says, but what about the original? Don't let people forget about the original! Because I love history, and I don't want F.W. Murnau's rip-off Dracula movie to be lost in the sands of time as, oh, you mean that vampire that was on the night shift in the Krusty Krab? I go into every remake with this fear, because as a kid I would say things like, my favourite singer's David Bowie, and the other kids would look at me gormlessly and say, who? I wanted so badly for people to take interest in the things I thought were great, but at the same time I have this ridiculous idea that things I like should be untouchable, to preserve the sanctity of them. That, wow, I am so smart and cultured because I know something you don't know feeling that has been one of my largest flaws since time immemorial. I take your I'm not like other girls and raise you my I'm not like anyone. So that is why I left and felt torn. I didn't want to enjoy it, I wanted to scorn it. Burn the witch, for she hath sinned, and all that rubbish. But the truth is, I can't sit here and shit on a film that has remade my favourite film of all time in such a wonderful and loving way. Eger's love for Nosferatu is evident throughout every shot. He's guilty of nothing but brilliant filmmaking. Hence, this video is less an analysis of Nosferatu and more an exposé on my own ignorant tendencies. You heard it here first, folks. I am not a reliable narrator. But I am capable of admitting when I am wrong. And in this battle I would happily admit that I was.